Belarus opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya is holding talks with EU foreign ministers in Brussels as the EU prepares sanctions against the Belarusian government. The bloc has a list of around 40 Belarusian officials who it blames for abuses of power against ongoing anti-government protest, as well as electoral fraud in last month's disputed elections. But the sanctions have so far been held up by Cyprus, which is demanding the EU take measures against Turkey in a separate dispute. Earlier, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas called for the bloc to discuss imposing sanctions on Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko himself.
The violence
that President Lukashenko has exercised towards peaceful protesters is completely unacceptable. People are being arrested and mistreated, and that's why we are going to be discussing today whether the EU should impose sanctions, not only on those that were involved in the fraudulent elections and in mistreatments, but we should also see if Mr. Lukashenko himself, as the person responsible for all of this, should be the subject of sanctions by the European Union.
That was the German foreign minister. Now protesters in Belarus are saying nothing conceding nothing, to the intensive government crackdown that's underway. Tens of thousands gathered in major cities throughout the country on Sunday. Police and the military have been out in force, detaining peaceful demonstrators who are calling for Lukashenko to step down after those disputed elections.
The streets of Minsk turned into a sea of red and white flags, the symbol of the opposition. Tens of thousands joined the March of Justice in the capital and other cities. It's the sixth straight Sunday of protests. But what looks like a high turnout was actually significantly lower than other weekends. Perhaps a result of calls by President Alexander Lukashenko for tougher action against his critics who want him to step down. Some of them have never experienced Belarus without him. Belarus is dreaming of democracy. Belarus is dreaming of freedom and justice, where laws are observed. We don't want our children to grow up in a prison. Look around. There are people in uniforms behind barbed wire everywhere. The government is flexing its military muscles. Armored vehicles are meant to intimidate protesters. Metro stations were closed. The internet slowed down. Dozens were arrested. And police brutality is getting more and more visible, like here in Grodno. "I'm not resisting. Stop strangling me. I haven't done anything," shouts this protester before police arrests him. In response to the latest escalation of violence, an online messaging channel with more than 2 million subscribers published a list of names, birthdays and addresses of more than 1,000 police officers.
And let's go now to Nick Connolly, who is standing by with the view from Minsk. Nick, tell us, because we just heard about this leak of personal details of hundreds of police officers, which has been distributed via the messaging app Telegram. What is behind that?
Good morning, Sarah. Well, this is a hack by opposition-minded hackers. This is an attempt by the opposition that is unarmed and has been coming out unarmed now for more than a month to somehow regain some kind of symmetry in all this conflict. The most striking thing about these protests is you have unarmed people up against armed police in balaclavas. If the police were so convinced that what they're doing is legitimate, even legal, why do they need to hide their faces? Obviously, there's great unease among certain parts of the police that they will be censured for this behaviour in the future by their neighbours, by their relatives, by society as a whole. So this is an attempt to try and put pressure on the armed services, on the security services, to stand back from the kind of violence we've seen in recent days. And it seems to be working. That Telegram channel you mentioned there, already supposedly several hundred members of the security services have been in touch asking to be removed from that list, promising to leave their jobs in these security services. We've seen posters up in people's houses where the opposition said, look, this is your neighbour, this is what he did, this is how he hit a protester at this protest. So that is a strategy the opposition seems to be taking now, and one that looks to provide plenty of chance of success.
And as we see these actions going back and forth, Nick, just take us now to the big picture, because protests have entered their 7th week. What is the sense of resolve among the protest movement right now?
Well, there was definitely greater nervousness yesterday, given the greater willingness to use violence, even against women who previously had been treated somewhat more carefully by the riot police here in Minsk. As for the numbers yesterday, I don't think they were down that much. The thing was that the protest was very spread out. The government had basically locked down the centre, and so the protesters were spread across large parts of Minsk suburbs, so there wasn't one big marching group. People were spread into several groups, making it easier, obviously, for the police to make arrests. But it's not just about these big set pieces on the weekends, these big protests in the downtown. This protest is going wider. You see people in the evenings meeting their neighbours in their yards, around their buildings, talking politics with their kids out. There's one very famous yard where there's an opposition mural that the police has removed time and time again. Time and time again the locals have replaced it, and so that the police has now had to come out and guard a wall to prevent local people from restoring this mural. So a real kind of cat and mouse game in which it doesn't really seem like the government has many chances of being everywhere all the time.
Nick, on the international level, we know EU foreign ministers, they're meeting today in Brussels to approve sanctions on Belarus. Is that likely to impact the situation?
Well, it's very difficult to see what the EU can do, what kind of real impact it can make, given that this is a regime that has come under sanctions time and time again, and these kind of personalised travel bans, asset freezes, that is something that everyone in the government here was prepared for and has seen in the past, and has also seen being taken away in the past. I think this is about symbolism, this is about showing that the outside world is paying attention and is following these protests closely. When you talk to people here, they say as long as Europe is watching what's happening here, they believe that the regime will hold back from some of the worst kinds of oppression, but this is now just a battle, a fight that will be decided here in Belarus without Europe being able to do too much to tilt the balance of power either way.
DW's Nick Connolly reporting from Minsk. Thank you.